the 7th of December, 1941. The morning sun over Pearl Harbor is torn apart by the scream of engines and the thunder of falling ordnance. Plumes of black smoke choke the horizon, rising from the shattered steel of the USS Arizona. Men scramble across oil-slicked decks, their shouts lost in the relentless roar of the sky. Thousands of miles away, inside a quiet command center in Washington, an officer stands motionless. A stack of intercepted cables slips from his fingers, scattering across the floor. He stares at the papers, his eyes tracing the fragmented reports that had sat ignored for weeks. The warnings were there, hidden in plain sight, but the lines of communication had remained severed. No one had the authority to connect the dots. The United States is at war, and the cost of this intelligence blindness is measured in the rising smoke of the Pacific. The officer turns his gaze to the wall, where the map of the world now looks entirely different. The shock of the attack has stripped away the illusion of safety. The nation is caught off guard, bleeding from a wound that could have been prevented. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the frantic ticking of a clock. The news from the Pacific reached the White House like a physical blow. President Franklin D. Roosevelt slammed his hand onto his desk, the wood vibrating under the force of his frustration. He did not call for more reports. He called for a change in the nature of the war itself. He summoned William Wild Bill Donovan to the office, the air heavy with the demand for a new kind of defense. "We need a central nervous system for our secrets," Roosevelt commanded, his voice cutting through the tension of the room. Donovan accepted the mandate, understanding that the old ways of gathering information had died in the harbor. Together, they drafted the blueprint for a new organization. They bypassed the bureaucratic friction that had crippled previous efforts. The Office of Strategic Services was born from this singular, desperate necessity. It was designed to be the eyes and ears of a nation that had been caught blind. Donovan began recruiting not just soldiers, but experts in sabotage, linguistics, and covert operations. They were a new breed of warrior, trained to operate in the shadows where traditional military power could not reach. The OSS was no longer just a collection of analysts. It was a weaponized intelligence network. The transition was swift, turning the chaos of the recent failure into a calculated, aggressive strategy for the long fight ahead. Under the cover of moonless nights, OSS agents parachuted into the heart of occupied France. They moved through dense forests, carrying heavy packs of plastic explosives and radio equipment. Their target: the rail lines that fed the German war machine. They crawled beneath the steel tracks, set the charges, and retreated into the shadows. The resulting explosions buckled the iron, sending supply trains careening off the embankments. These acts of sabotage choked the enemy's supply lines, proving that a handful of agents could paralyze an entire division. The OSS became a phantom force, feeding maps and intelligence directly to Allied commanders. But the war ended in 1945, and the strategic landscape shifted overnight. The victory that the OSS helped secure became the very reason for its demise. The offices were cleared. Thousands of classified files were packed into wooden crates and hauled away to storage. The lights went out. The silence that followed the dismantling of the OSS did not last. Across the Atlantic, the Kremlin began a rapid, systematic mobilization. Soviet engineers worked around the clock, their efforts focused on a singular goal that threatened the fragile post-war peace. In Washington, the reports began to arrive on the desk of President Harry Truman. He read the intelligence summaries. He confirmed the existence of a Soviet nuclear program. The implications were immediate and absolute. Truman stared at the maps pinned to his wall, the geography of Europe now marked by new, invisible borders. The threat was no longer a distant possibility. It was an encroaching reality. He recognized the old systems were insufficient. The atmosphere in the Oval Office grew heavy with the weight of this new, global confrontation. Every intercepted transmission signaled that the peace was merely a pause. The shadow war had begun, and the United States stood once again in the path of a catastrophic intelligence void. President Harry Truman sat alone at his desk. The National Security Act spread out before him. The document was thick, its pages filled with the blueprint for a new kind of power. He picked up a fountain pen, the metal cool against his fingers. Outside the window, the world was already changing, but inside the room, everything hinged on a single, decisive stroke. He held the pen steady, the nib hovering just millimeters above the signature line. He thought of the intelligence gaps of the past, the broken lines of communication, and the cost of being unprepared. He pressed the nib down. The ink bled into the paper, a dark, permanent mark that signaled the end of the old order. With that one motion, the Central Intelligence Agency was born. The act was more than just law. It was the foundation of a permanent, global apparatus designed to operate in the shadows. Truman set the pen down and looked at the document. The structure was now in place, a new pillar of American strategy. The mandate was clear, but the reality was found in the damp, cobblestone alleys of Berlin. Unlike the open maneuvers of the past, this war was fought in the periphery of vision. Agents moved through the city under the cover of relentless rain, their footsteps muffled by the slick pavement. In a narrow, lightless passage, two men brushed past each other. A small, cold canister of microfilm changed hands. No words were exchanged. No glances were shared. The contact vanished into the fog before the echo of his heels faded. Behind the Iron Curtain, the agency hunted for sources, men and women willing to trade secrets for survival. Every meeting was a gamble against discovery. Every handshake carried the risk of betrayal. In the shadows of a divided city, the agency proved that the modern world was a chessboard where the most lethal moves were never seen. The ground-level game of shadows was no longer enough. The agency looked upward, seeking a vantage point that no human eye could reach. On the runway, the U-2 spy plane sat, wings long and thin, designed for the thin air of the stratosphere. The pilot engaged the throttle. The machine surged forward, tearing away from the Earth. As it climbed, the world below began to flatten, the jagged borders of nations dissolving into a singular, vast topography. The engine roar dwindled to a distant hum, replaced by the profound, pressurized silence of the edge of space. At 70,000 feet, the sky turned a deep, bruised violet. The pilot looked down through the reinforced glass. Below, the enemy's hidden movements were laid bare. Missile sites, troop concentrations, and industrial complexes all were captured by the long-range cameras. The globe was no longer a collection of separate cities. It was a map of secrets, exposed to the cold, unblinking gaze of the lens. Every movement on the surface became a data point, every hidden facility a target for analysis. This was the ultimate evolution of intelligence, a godlike perspective. The wartime experiment had matured into a permanent pillar of power. The agency moved from the fringe of government into the center of the decision-making process. Inside the Oval Office, the air was thick with the weight of global instability. Briefing folders were opened on the mahogany desk, their pages filled with intelligence gathered from every corner of the map. The president listened, his focus shifting as the agency laid out the hidden currents of international conflict. This was the new reality. The agency became the primary lens through which the nation viewed the world. It tracked global shifts before they manifested as crises, providing the data that dictated the movement of fleets and the tone of diplomacy. Behind the scenes, covert missions were authorized and executed with surgical precision, leaving no trace in the public record. These operations were the invisible gears of statecraft, turning in the dark to influence outcomes thousands of miles away. The agency no longer just reported on the world. It actively shaped the environment in which the president operated. It became a constant, silent presence in the halls of power, a mechanism that never slept and never fully withdrew. The transition was complete. It had evolved into a sophisticated machine of strategy, outside the headlines. The history of the agency is written in the silence between events. It is a record of crises averted before they reach the front page, and of strategic shifts orchestrated in rooms where no cameras were permitted. The catastrophic failure at the start of the war had been replaced by a system of total awareness. This is the new reality of the modern era. The most critical battles are fought long before a single shot is fired. The agency operates in the shadows of the global grid, monitoring the pulse of nations and the intentions of rivals with a cold, analytical precision. It has transformed the chaotic uncertainty of the world into a manageable map of risks and opportunities. There is no final victory in this war, only a perpetual state of vigilance. The agents who move through the world today do so without recognition, their work existing in the quiet spaces, of diplomacy and intelligence. They are the architects of a strategy that prioritizes foresight over force. As the sun sets on the era that birthed this machine, the reality remains. The world is watched, analyzed, and influenced by a force that never sleeps. The silence is not an absence of power, it is the ultimate expression of it. In this age of surveillance, the most profound influence is wielded by those who remain unseen, ensuring that the nation's survival is secured in the dark, far from the reach of public scrutiny. The war never truly ends. It simply moves into the quiet, invisible domain of the mind and the machine.